Part 1. Candide's Garden. I knew a child who cried because his concierge's son had died. His parents let him cry, and then they got annoyed. After all, that little boy was not your brother. The child dried his tears, but that was a dangerous thing to teach. Useless to cry over a little boy who is a stranger, so be it. But why cry over one's brother? It's none of your business, says the woman, holding her husband back who wants to join in a fight. The husband goes away, docile. But if the woman asks for his help a few minutes later, saying, "I'm tired, I'm cold," he looks at her with surprise from the heart of the solitude where he has withdrawn, thinking, "Is that my business? What does India matter, and what does Epirus matter? Why call this soil, this woman, these children mine? I brought these children into the world. They are here. The woman is next to me. The soil is under my feet. No tie exists between them and me." Mr. Camus' stranger thinks like this. He feels foreign to the world, which is completely foreign to him. Often during hardship, man thus denies all his attachments. He does not want hardship. He looks for a way to flee from it. He looks within himself. He sees an indifferent body, a heart that beats to a steady rhythm, a voice that says, "I exist." The hardship is not there. It is in the deserted house, on this dead face, in these streets. If I go within myself, I look at those inert streets with astonishment, saying, "But what does it matter to me? All this means nothing to me." I find myself indifferent, peaceful. But what has changed? Asked the sedentary petit bourgeois in September 1940, sitting in the midst of his belongings. We still eat the same steaks? The changes only existed outside. What did they concern him? If I myself were only a thing, nothing indeed would concern me. If I withdraw into myself, the other is also closed for me. The inert existence of things is separation and solitude. There exists no ready-made attachment between the world and me, and as long as I am a symbol given in the midst of nature, nothing is mine. A country is not mine, if only I grew there like a plant. What is built upon me, without me, is not mine. The rock that passively supports a house cannot claim that the house is its own. Mr. Camus' stranger is right to reject all those ties that others want to impose on him from the outside. No tie is given at first. If a man is satisfied with a completely exterior relationship with the object, saying, "My painting, my park, my workers," because a contract bestowed him with the rights over these objects, it is because he is choosing to delude himself. He would like to spread out his place on earth, to expand his being beyond the limits of his body and his memory, yet without running the risk of any action. The object facing him remains indifferent. Foreign, social, organic, economic relationships are only external relationships, and cannot be the foundation of any true possession. In order to appropriate safely goods that are not our own, we can still resort to other ruses. Seated by his fire and reading in his newspaper the tale of someone who climbed the Himalayas, the contented bourgeois cries out proudly, "Now there's what a man can do!" He feels like he climbed the Himalayas himself. By identifying himself with his sex, his country, his class, with the whole of humanity, a man can increase his garden, but he increases it only in words. This identification is but an empty pretension. Only that in which I recognize my being is mine, and I can only recognize it where it is engaged. In order for an object to belong to me, it must have been founded by me. It is totally mine only if I founded it in its totality. The only reality that belongs entirely to me is, therefore, my act. Even a work fashioned out of materials that are not mine escapes me in certain ways. What is mine is first the accomplishment of my project. A victory is mine if I fought for it. If the weary conqueror can rejoice in the victories of his own son, it is because he wanted a son precisely in order to prolong his work. It is really the accomplishment of his own project that he salutes. It is because my subjectivity is not inertia folding in upon itself, separation, but, on the contrary, movement toward the other, that the difference between me and the other is abolished, and I can call the other mine. Only I can create the tie that unites me to the other. I create it from the fact that I am not a thing, but a project of self toward the other, a transcendence. And it is this power that Camus' stranger is unaware of. No possession is given, but the foreign indifference of the world is not given either. I am not first a thing, but a spontaneity that desires, that loves, that wants, that acts. That little boy is not my brother, but if I cry over him, he is no longer a stranger to me. It's my tears that decide. Nothing is decided before me. When the disciples asked Christ, "Who is my neighbor?" Christ didn't respond by an enumeration. He told the parable of the Good Samaritan. The latter was the neighbor of the man abandoned on the road. He covered him with his cloak and came to his aid. One is not the neighbor of anyone. One makes the other a neighbor by making oneself his neighbor through an act. What is mine is therefore first what I do. But as soon as I have done it, the object goes and separates itself from me. It escapes me. The thought that I expressed a moment ago, is it still my thought? In order for the past to be mine, I must make it mine again each instant by taking it toward my future. Even the projects that were not mine in the past because I didn't found them can be made into mine if I found something on them. I can rejoice in a victory in which I did not participate, if I take it as a point of departure from my own conquests. The house that I did not build becomes my house if I live in it, and the earth my earth if I work it. My relationships with things are not given, are not fixed. I create them minute by minute. Some die, some are born, and others are revived. They are constantly changing. Each new act of surpassing gives me anew the things surpassed. And that's why technologies are ways of appropriating the world. The sky belongs to those who know how to fly. The sea belongs to those who know how to swim and navigate. Thus our relationship with the world is not decided from the onset. It is we who decide, but we do not arbitrarily decide just anything. What I surpass is always my past, and the object, such as it exists within that past. My future envelops that past. The former cannot build itself without the latter. The Chinese are not my brothers from the moment I cry over their hardships, but one does not cry over the Chinese as he pleases. If I have never worried about Babylon, I cannot suddenly choose to be interested in the latest theories about the location of Babylon. I cannot suffer a defeat. If I have not engaged in the vanquished country, I will suffer defeat in accordance with my engagements. A man who has fused his destiny with that of his country, its leader, for example, could say, "My defeat," in the face of the disaster. A man who has lived in a certain country, without doing anything but eating and sleeping there, will see the event only as a change of habits. It can happen that, in light of a new fact, one suddenly becomes aware of engagements that have been lived without being thought, but at least they had to have existed. As distinct from me, things never affect me. I am never affected except in my own possibilities. We are therefore surrounded by forbidden wealth, and we often get irritated with these limits. We would like the entire world to become ours. We covet the goods of others. I knew, among others, one young student who wanted first to make the world of the athlete hers, then that of the gambler, the flirt, the adventurer, the politician, one after another. She tried her hand in each of these domains, without understanding that she remained a student, hungry for experience. She believed that she was varying her life, but the unity of her life unified all of its diverse moments. An intellectual who takes the side of the proletariat does not become proletarian. He is an intellectual, taking the side of the proletariat. The painting that Van Gogh paints is a new and free creation, but it is still a Van Gogh. If he claimed to paint a Gauguin, he would only make an imitation of Gauguin by Van Gogh, and that's why Candide's advice is superfluous. It's always my garden that I will cultivate. I am enclosed within it, until death, because that garden becomes mine from the moment I cultivate it. In order for this piece of universe to belong to me, however, I must truly cultivate it. Man's activity is often lazy. Instead of accomplishing true acts, he contents himself with pretenses. The fly on the stagecoach claims that he is the one who led the carriage to the top of the hill, to walk around talking about it, taking photographs of it, is not to participate in a war, in an expedition. There are even behaviors that contradict the ends that they claim to aim for. By establishing institutions that allow a sort of equilibrium in the midst of misery, a charitable lady tends to perpetuate the misery that she wants to alleviate. In order to know what is mine, I must know what I am really doing. We see then that one can assign no dimension to the garden in which Candide wants to enclose me. It is not drawn out in advance. It is I who choose its location and limits. And since, in any case, these limits are ridiculous compared to the infinity that surrounds me, wouldn't it be wise to reduce them as much as possible? The smaller it is, the less hold destiny will have over it. Let man therefore renounce all projects. Let him imitate that judicious schoolboy who cried in order to not say the letter A. Let him be like the god Indra, who, after having exhausted his strength in his victory over a fearsome demon, reduced himself to the dimensions of an atom, and chose to live outside the world, under silent and indifferent waters, at the heart of a lotus stem.